Yo, welcome into the show. You're watching Philadelphia Eagles Now. Chase Sr. here with you. And as always, no matter where you are or how you're tuned in, thank you so much for making today's show a part of your day. Eagles OTAs are happening this week at the NovaCare Complex in South Philadelphia. So there's a lot to talk about here on the show. And one of the biggest storylines coming out of practice yesterday, the first public practice for Philadelphia, where media members were actually allowed to be on hand, is the story of Bryce Huff. According to Jeff McLean, Philadelphia Inquirer, Howie Roseman and the Birds are looking to move off of him. And then on the back half of the show, I'm going to get into my 10 most important Philadelphia Eagles going into the 2025 campaign as the Eagles look to repeat as Super Bowl champions. And speaking of the Eagles being Super Bowl champions, Eagles OTAs in session yesterday. A little bit rainy in South Philadelphia, so the Eagles were inside the practice bubble. This is just incredible artwork right here. The Birds commemorating and remembering the 2017 Super Bowl and the 2024 Super Bowl. It's Super Bowl 52 and Super Bowl 59. If that doesn't set the standard for all Eagles players looking up at that during practice, I don't know what does. Let's begin here with Bryce Huff, because on that practice field yesterday, number 0 was not there. And he was a 0 on the Eagles practice field. He's pretty much a 0 last year, too. That's his jersey number, obviously, as you can see here to my right. And he was the biggest notable absence. Of course, it's important to remember that OTAs stand for Organized Team Activities. They are voluntary workouts. That being said, Eagles won the Super Bowl last year. Almost everybody was there. That's a good sign. But not everybody has to be there. But when a player like this is not there, it's going to drum up some storylines. That's exactly what happened. And it looks as though his future is in doubt with the Eagles in 2025. And this is significant for a multitude of reasons, right? The Eagles gave Huff $34 million in guaranteed money. And right from the start, Vic Fangio never trusted him. He wasn't running with the ones in training camp. He was playing deep into preseason games, trying to understand and learn the system. And when you watched Bryce Huff all year, producer Chip and myself were like, do you ever have an itchy butt? Like, what the heck is going on with Bryce Huff? Just don't understand it, right? Howie Roseman really liked him. Vic Fangio never did. I said that because we're playing this game, slip it in. All hosts are pulling a card today, and I was left with this. Do you ever have an itchy butt? But with Bryce Huff, you're like, dude, are you itching your butt? You're not getting after the quarterback. You got to focus on trying to get to the QB. Here's what Jeff McLean said as we get back on track on Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff wasn't at practice. In fact, the defensive end hasn't attended Eagles workouts this entire spring, an NFL source said. That doesn't necessarily come as a huge surprise, since he is unlikely to be a part of the Eagles' plans for 2025. General Manager Howie Roseman, when asked about Huff in early February, might have said his story, quote, is yet to be written. But the fact that he was inactive for the Super Bowl said more about his future in Philadelphia. Huff is still under contract and is owed $16.75 million in guaranteed money this season. Workouts are voluntary, but his absence suggests it was mutually agreed upon. The Eagles don't want him getting injured in case they can still unload him after June 1st, when it would make more fiscal sense. And he certainly doesn't want to be where he isn't exactly wanted. Can the Eagles trade him? Probably not with that price tag. Maybe they eat a large portion of his salary just to cut bait, or they swap your underperforming overpaid free agent for mine. Or maybe they suffer some injuries at edge rusher this spring and have no choice but to have him in uniform when training camp starts. But my guess is Howie Roseman is eventually forced to waive one of his few bad moves from last offseason. And it was one of the few bad moves for Philadelphia. Saquon Barkley knocked it out of the park. Offensive Player of the Year, best single season for a running back in the history of the NFL. Mekhi Becton, a mauler at right guard. Zach Bond, first-team All-Pro, finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. C.J. Gardner-Johnson played terrific football on that back end. But Bryce Huff was a miss. And again, it started with training camp, and you're wondering, what the heck is going on? Vic Fangio just doesn't like the player. Howie Roseman might, but Vic Fangio is calling the shots on the defensive side of the ball. Then to start the year, his snaps were down. and he wasn't really doing anything. Then he got hurt. He came back. And then Jalen Hunt outperformed him, outplayed him, made us all forget that Bryce Huff was on the team, and Huff was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl. Now, whether it's a trade or a cut post-June 1, regardless of what happens, if the Eagles do get rid of Huff in some way, shape, or form, they're going to have to eat a chunk of money, and that salary is nearly $17 million this year, but no guaranteed money after 2025. And so maybe that entices a team to trade for a player who was really good 2 years ago. The Eagles' actions are speaking loudly here with how they've handled the situation, what they've said, what they did during the year, what they did in free agency and in the NFL draft. They are very high on Nolan Smith. They are very high on Jalen Hunt. Then they added Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche in free agency. At that moment, you're thinking, if you're in Bryce Huff's shoes, he's not feeling good about his chances to be on this Eagles team in 2025, and maybe it's best because he needs a new change of scenery. Then, after adding Uche and Ojulari, two players with a lot of potential and ability to get after the quarterback, what did the Eagles do in the NFL draft? They drafted Antoine Powell-Ryland, who's been one of the more productive defensive ends in college football the last 2 years, in the build of a Brandon Graham type of player, and he's getting off to a good start in OTAs. Right away, when I think about two teams that make sense for Bryce Huff, I continue to think about these two squads here to my right. The Atlanta Falcons, number 1, and the San Francisco 49ers, number 2. With Atlanta last year, they did draft Jalen Walker and James Pierce, but they couldn't get after the quarterback last year, and I like both of those rookies for their own reasons, right, as individual players, but they're rookies, right? Bryce Huff is a veteran at this point, and I think Huff could really help what was a very lackluster pass rush for Atlanta last year, and there's a lot of pressure on that regime to win this year. If they don't, I think Raheem Morris and his staff are getting canned. The Falcons last year allowed the highest completion percentage in the NFL at nearly 70%, second most touchdowns, 34 through the air. Falcons were also last in the NFL in sacks with only 31, and they were last in pressure percentage at 28.1%. So the Falcons could be a team that comes calling for Bryce Huff. As for the 49ers, Robert Saleh is back with San Francisco as their defensive coordinator, and Huff in 2023 balled out under Robert Saleh when he was calling the shots defensively for the Jets as their head coach. And that's what led to Huff getting paid big-time dollars by Howie Roseman and the Eagles. He had an overall PFF grade in 2023 of 79.7, 33rd among 197 edge rushers that year. His pass rush grade, elite, 86.8. That was 11th. Run defense grade, never his strength. He actually improved upon that in a smaller workload with Philadelphia. But in 2023, it was 48, 169th among 197 players at that position. But he did have 10 sacks. That was 22nd in the NFL. His 67 pressures ranked 15th. And this all came on less than 50% of the snaps. He was 56th at the position in snaps with only 334. And so Huff to the Niners, I think, would also make a lot of sense. They drafted Mykel Williams. They drafted 2 defensive tackles, but they could really sorely use some depth at that pass rusher spot alongside Nick Bosa. Either way, Eagles are going to be fine without Bryce Huff. And it's become clear they don't really care about him as far as their plans for 2025 and beyond. But the youth and the talent at that edge rusher position for Philadelphia, the arrow was pointing up. Nolan Smith, what a terrific year he had last year. He tore his triceps in the Super Bowl against Kansas City. Played with that injury in the second half of that game, but he went from 1 sack as a rookie to 6.5 sacks in year 2. Had 4 more in the playoffs. That was number 1 among all edge defenders in the playoffs last year. And look at how the Pro Football Focus numbers shook out for Nolan Smith last year. Overall PFF grade of 76.1, 27th at the position among 211 players. Pass rush grade was 70.2. Run defense, 77.6. That was 14th. That wasn't looked at as a strength of his coming out of Georgia. Sacks, 6.5. That was 33rd. yet he was 70th in pass rush snaps with 277, 59th in hurries, 57th in pressures, and 59th in stops. And then there's Jalen Hunt, who we talked about a little bit earlier briefly, as a player who the Eagles really like. And what's crazy about Hunt's path is that he was a safety at Cornell to start his college career. He is raw as a pass rusher. He played that a couple of years with Houston Christian. And then last year, you start to see him turn it on in the snap of a finger where he was cooking in the NFL playoffs. And I can't wait to see the continued development of Nolan Smith and Jalen Hunt. And frankly, you don't want Bryce Huff being in front of those players anyway. And Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche as backups, pretty damn good. Before we continue to push forward on today's show, another milestone is up next. We're 240 people away from 121,000 subscribers. Hit that sub button if you want the best, most elite Eagles coverage right here on YouTube. Just got word from our ad ops guy, Jack Lauderay here at Chat Sports. He said these Super Bowl hats are crushing. You can get yours today. Chatsports.com/Super Bowl hat. The kids' hat's on sale right now for just $18. But if you use that link down below, there are deals on adult hats as well. These are flying off the shelves thanks to all of the real ones who are supporting the program. It's chatsports.com/Super Bowl hat. Use that link, plug it into your web browser. It'll take you to Fanatics, and Fanatics will know that Chat Sports sent you. All right, to the back half of the show. This is Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports. My name is Chase Sr., and coming up over the next several minutes, I am going to list the 10 most important Philadelphia Eagles going into the 2025 campaign. I think the most important Eagle going into this upcoming season, as the Birds look to defend their Super Bowl championship, new offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo. He's been with Nick Sirianni going back to their Colts days. He came with Sirianni to Philadelphia in 2021. Since then, he has been Sirianni's right-hand man. When we asked Sirianni about Patullo at the Super Bowl, because there were a lot of rumblings that in New Orleans, Kellen Moore was going to take that Saints job, we asked Sirianni about Patullo, and he said, my head coaching duties, my game planning duties, I run them through Kevin Patullo. So he's kind of been a de facto assistant associate head coach, and he had one of those titles last year. And as far as what the Eagles have done offensively with their game plans, Kevin Patullo has played a role within that as well. Players have talked about it. Players have advocated and rooted on the fact that the Eagles have internally promoted him. We know what happened last time, that the Eagles internally promoted an offensive coordinator. It was Brian Johnson. It didn't work out. Part of the reason it didn't work out, I thought at times he was in over his skis. I thought at times Nick Sirianni was meddling a little bit, too much a part of the game plan as far as what he wanted his offensive philosophy for his football team to be. But Brian Johnson wasn't innovative. He didn't bring about any fresh ideas. The Eagles were one of the worst teams in the NFL as far as pre-snap motion. Their offensive concepts were vanilla, mundane, not creative, and at times archaic. That led to the Eagles' offense being highly predictable, especially late in the year after the 49ers broke Philadelphia in that late season game, the rematch of the NFC Championship game the year before. And so I hope that Kevin Patullo has some new wrinkles. He has some creative ideas. He continues to do what Kellen Moore did, which was incorporate some new offensive philosophies to keep things fresh on the offensive side of the ball. And it's not going to be easy to replace Kellen Moore. The Eagles' offense last year, 5th in points per game scored, 29 per game, 8th in yards per game, 11th in yards per play, 11th on third downs, 10th in the red zone, the best rushing offense in the NFL, and they really cooked the last two games of the playoffs. NFC Championship game against Washington, a 55-burger, and then against Steve Spagnuolo, absolutely annihilated one of the top defenses and defensive coordinators in the National Football League. Most important Eagle number 2 is cornerback Kelee Ringo. Big shoes to fill with Darius Slay moving on and signing that one-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last year, Slay wasn't the normal big play Slay that he was in 2022 when he was an All-Pro. but he was better last year than he was in 2023. And his numbers were especially fantastic in the NFL playoffs. Still one of the top corners in the game, in my opinion. Good ball skills, still has speed, still has leadership, even though he says some funky things from time to time. But last year in the regular season, overall PFF grade of 67.6, a coverage grade of 68.9. In the playoffs, 77.1, and a coverage grade of 78.9. He was a lockdown corner for this number one overall defense under Vic Fangio. And last year, he made a lot of plays on the football. 12 pass breakups. That was fourth in the NFL. And when you lose a player who is a borderline Hall of Famer, who was a first-team All-Pro in 2017, has been to 6 Pro Bowls, was the interception co-leader in 2017, an Eagles team captain who played in 2 Super Bowls, who won one as a team captain, those are big shoes to fill. And cornerback is not an easy position to play. I like Ringo's size. I like his physicality. I like his length. He's over 200 pounds. He's over 6 feet. He ran a 4.36 40-yard dash in the pre-draft process coming out of Georgia. He's shown me some good things from time to time. But if you have a leaky valve at that outside corner spot, that could be a bad sign. Adoree Jackson getting some first-team reps there in OTAs. Cooper DeJean, Eli Ricks in the mix as well. But the Eagles probably want Kelee Ringo to win that job because they moved up to take him in the draft a couple of years ago, and the ability is certainly there. How about Moro Ojomo? Also a critical Eagle going into the 2025 campaign. He's looking to replace Milton Williams, who got $26 million per season from the New England Patriots. And a lot of people don't realize how good Moro Ojomo is and was last year. But if you watch this show, we've been talking about this for a long time. Overall PFF grade of 68, 39th among 219 defensive tackles in the NFL. Here's where it gets juicy. His pass rush grade, 82.6. 5th at the position, despite him being 64th in pass rush snaps among defensive tackles. He was top 25 in pressures with 26, and he was top 25 in hurries with 26. And he had 31 pressures. That was 35th in the NFL. He also had the highest pass rush win rate among all Eagles defensive linemen at 18.2%. That was higher than Milton Williams. Still a young player. We've seen glimpses of him being dominant from the interior of that Eagles defensive line. And I'm saying this right now. I've been saying it. He has the potential to be better than Milton Williams. Next up, safety Reed Blankenship. The Eagles traded away C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He was the heart and soul, the backbone of that Eagles back end and arguably of that Eagles defense. The swagger, the confidence, the physicality, the ball skills, the ability to be in the right spot at the right time to make crucial plays. Eagles are going to miss that with C.J. Gardner-Johnson now playing in Houston with the Texans. Now, some of the extracurricular stuff, probably a big reason why the Eagles moved on, because you never know when CJ is going to pop off. But when you trade a player of that caliber, and Reed Blankenship is now the anchor in that safety room, the leader of that safety room, and Darius Slay pinned him as one of the leaders next up on that Eagles defense, there's some pressure on Reed Blankenship. He's also going into a huge year because he has an opportunity to land a pretty lofty contract extension at a position, safety, that is really starting to blow up and explode as far as the market value there. And I think Blankenship is one of the more underrated players on this Eagles team, one of the more underrated defenders in the National Football League. Checked out very well according to PFF. Overall grade of 74.4. That was 25th at the position. 72.3 the run defense grade. 73.6 the coverage grade. He had 4 picks. That was 6th among all safeties on 524 coverage snaps. I'm a believer in the player. Exciting whites, exciting Mikes. Going to be bringing it in 2025. Jalen Hunt is also a pivotal Eagle going into this upcoming season because the Eagles moved off of Josh Sweat, who has been a highly productive pass rusher for them ever since he got drafted out of Florida State in the 4th round. And Jalen Hunt in the playoffs was one of the highest performing edge rushers in the entire National Football League. Overall PFF grade of 74. That was 12th among 60 playoff edge rushers. Pass rush grade of 76.5. That was 7th. He had 2 sacks. That was 6th. He had 7 hurries. That was 7th. He had 9 pressures. That was 6th. And without Brandon Graham, too, and without Josh Sweat, the pressure is on Jalen Hurts and Nolan Smith because I think those are going to be the starting edge rushers for this Eagles defense in 2025. And speaking of Nolan Smith, he has to be on this list too, right? 1 sack as a rookie, 6.5 sacks in year 2, 4 sacks in the NFL playoffs. And his 4 sacks in the NFL playoffs, number 1 among all edge rushers. As far as his personality, it's very similar to Brandon Graham's. Always has a smile, always talking shit, always playing with great energy, good against the run, good as a pass rusher, and the Eagles look at him as one of the pillars of this organization. I have to also include Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts last year in the pass game was a little bit up and down. He was a little bit Jekyll and Hyde. He needs to be a little bit more consistent. And for Jalen Hurts, I think it's been hard for him to find a groove in the passing game because he's had like 10 offensive coordinators over his last 10 years of playing football, Alabama, Oklahoma, and in the National Football League. And then last year, the Eagles ran the ball so often as Saquon Barkley had more than 2,000 rushing yards, led the league in touches. That led to Hurts kind of struggling to find a groove in the pass game. And throwing the football at the NFL level especially can be rhythmic, right? And there was just a lack of rhythm there. But what did Jalen Hurts do? He cooked in the NFC Championship game. He was fabulous in the Super Bowl. He won Super Bowl MVP. And so I want to see Jalen Hurts build off of that because I think teams are really going to sell out in trying to stop the run against this offensive line, against Saquon Barkley, and the Eagles might have to be a more balanced offense to kind of change things up to duplicate their success as far as wins and losses and playoff success from last year to 2025. And they can really do that, I think, if Hurts can take a little bit of a leap forward throwing the football and play more consistently like he did in the NFC title game and in the Super Bowl. He's capable of it. He was the MVP runner-up in the 2022 campaign. I just want to see him be more consistent at this point of his career as he's 26 years old. He's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Again, I'm asking for something small here, though, and make Kevin Patullo's job a little bit easier and handle what he puts on your plate. Nick Sirianni, he got his contract extension. He's an important Eagle, of course, going into 2025 for these reasons here. Nick Sirianni, it is not easy in the city of Philadelphia to put together the types of seasons consecutively that Sirianni has been able to put together as the head coach of this football team. But the Eagles are no longer hunting. They are the hunted. Part of what makes Nick Sirianni one of the top coaches in the NFL, talent development, the ability to hire great coaches and develop coaches. Players have really been able to have career years and take massive strides in their respective careers under Nick Sirianni. I think he's excellent at managing the game. I think he's great at making adjustments in season and in game catered to the strengths of the football team. But your message and your approach and how you manage your team, you manage the locker room, how you manage games, how you manage a season, it's different when you have the expectations on you from winning the Super Bowl and being a Super Bowl winning head coach. And so this season is going to be hard. The schedule is difficult. Adversity might hit. Eagles handled adversity perfectly in 2022. They did not handle adversity well in 2023. They handled it great in 2024. The 2-2 start, people wanted Nick Sirianni fired after losing against the Bucs. They go into the bye week 5. The only time they lost again was against the Commanders when Jalen Hurts got hurt. And so Nick Sirianni handled that beautifully. And when you have Super Bowl expectations coming off a Super Bowl, you're the one that has the target on your back, you're being hunted, there's more weight to that. And Sirianni's going to have to manage it. And then have to talk about Zach Bond here. Not because I don't believe he's going to play at an elite level in 2025. I think he is. But if he gets hurt or if he struggles with the injury to Nakobe Dean, the uncertainty as far as the injury to Jahan Campbell, and the lack of depth at linebacker and how impactful Zach Bond was and what he meant to that second level, if he struggles, if he gets hurt, you worry about the second level of that Eagles defense. I mean, you put it in perspective how great Zach Bond was last year. He was terrific. Finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. A first-team All-Pro in his first year playing off-ball linebacker. And Pro Football Focus, they have high expectations for him going into 2025. They put out a list of their top 10 linebackers going into this upcoming season. Zach Bond, number 2, behind Fred Warner. And the Eagles have an opportunity here to pull off highway robbery once again. Fred Warner just signed a new contract with the San Francisco 49ers. Average annual value, $21 million. Zach Bond, average annual value, $17 million. His numbers last year, 20 games, 184 tackles, 79 stops, 13 TFL, 6 quarterback hits, 3.5 sacks, 3 INTs, 7 pass breakups, 6 forced fumbles, and a passer rating of 75 allowed. Compared to Fred Warner, 17 games, 131 tackles, 53 stops, 5 TFLs, 2 quarterback hits, 1 sack, 2 INTs, 7 pass breakups, 4 forced fumbles, and a passer rating allowed of 97.5. Obviously, Bond played more games, but the difference in games, isn't the whole reason why he has better stats. Warner obviously has the longer track record, but Bond will be quickly closing the gap if he can keep it up. Great tweet from Brandon Lee Gouton there of Bleeding Green Nation. And then lastly, the Eagles training staff. This is a sneaky one for me, but the Eagles have had this run of really good injury luck, players bouncing back from injuries, them being an athletic, physical, overpowering team that has had longevity and consistency as far as their health. And it was a flex from the Eagles training staff during the Super Bowl parade to hold up this sign. 21 of 22 day one starters played in the Super Bowl. That's an incredible flex right there. And if the Eagles are able to stay healthy, if injury luck is able to stay on their side, I think that they can go on a dynastic run. So whatever this Eagles training staff has done, keep it up. They have an important role here in 2025 because the Eagles now have made the playoffs every year under Nick Sirianni. They've had shorter off seasons. They play a physical brand of football, and injuries are the only thing, in my opinion, that can keep them from going on this special dynastic run. A reminder, hit that subscribe button right here on Philadelphia Eagles Now. Shows coming your way every single day. We're closing in on 121,000 subscribers, so join the movement. And if you want to give me a follow on X and Instagram, find me over there at Chase_Senior.